Hello, my name is Garret Pray of the Bard's Archive, a YouTube channel devoted to conversing with people who have lived through history and talking with historians who study it, all to help preserve it better. I'd like to say to all of you audio pongers, as Mark describes you, thank you for taking the time to watching this. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Audio Pong. And if you're interested in Bard's Archive, also as well. I'd like to say thank you to Mark and Zach who reached out and made this interview happen.
Hello and welcome back to Audio Pong. What's going on, Mark?
What's up, dude?
Not much, just trying to get over this sickness, but
Yeah, we're all sick of this house, man.
Man, it is
Are you
ridiculous.
down with the sickness?
You may hear an extra voice or see another face. That there is Garret Pray.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
So, what is your main profession?
My main profession is film.
Film. Very nice.
Yeah.
What do you do in your film? What kind of film do you do mostly?
So I've done a wide span of things, but right now I'm doing primarily documentary work, and I started up a YouTube channel called the Bard's Archive, which is all history interviews and site walking and talking to historians. So I can try and document society's elders before they pass, so we can get a little glimpse into the future and or not the future, the past. And
well, I think you can glimpse the future by looking at the past, right? Because history kind of tends to repeat itself.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when you study history, you find that there's a lot of history repeating itself.
Oh, that's what bothers me the most.
Particularly
up at night. Yeah.
Particularly negative history too, not necessarily positive stuff.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, history is filled with a lot of dark shit in it. So, hopefully, one day we can learn enough from our past to not keep continuing it.
Are you finding I actually love the idea. We've actually talked about this before about interviewing old people, or even going to an old timers community, as I call it, and just talking with the people there to hear their stories. Even if it was bullshit, it might still be interesting. But do you find are you running into that, a lot of dark stories, a lot of dark past with the people you interview?
I haven't quite gotten there yet, where I've talked to somebody who's got a bad story or something really dark that's happened to them specifically. With the archive, with my documentaries, I've talked about some really unpleasant stuff with people. For a couple of years, I'm doing a documentary on parapsychology, and I've talked to a number of veterans. One who was a teacher of mine, his name was Doug Anderson, and he was a Vietnam Army medic on the battlefield. So he told he told some pretty colorful stories when I interviewed him.
I'm sure he's got stories, yeah.
Oh yeah. So, and then afterwards, he went to New York, used the GI Bill to go to school, and that was really the beginning of his problems. And so he spent a good chunk of his life pretty much getting drunk or high every day. And he specifically described having a particular issue with hallucinations with shadows. He'd always see dead people, or shadows would take the shape of somebody who was dead.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Yeah, that was something that haunted him for a very long time. And it was something, I don't know if some of these people are still alive, but he was talking about also some of the Viet Cong when I had class with him. And these people literally would get so drunk, and they were such alcoholics to the point of which they could stand up straight, but when they would get back on their motorcycle or their bike that they drove to the VA event with, they'd be going back, almost falling over the whole time driving home.
So have you talked to a lot of people with PTSD? Because I know also before you answer that, I just want to make sure it's the Bard's Archive and it's on
Yeah.
YouTube, correct?
Yes. Yep.
I know, but I just want to make sure anybody listening or watching can check you
Yeah.
out over there. So,
Yeah. No, thank you.
yeah. So do you feel like you've been drawn to that, or has that just been the type of people that you've been talking to, or at least with the documentaries?
With the document, I mean, funny enough, with that documentary, it started out as something completely different. I had one person in particular. I'm not going to go into any details on the person because I don't think this is somebody that wants to have any sort of involvement with a project like this, even though they could use the help. And so then eventually it turned into this idea of like, well, why don't I just, talk to people and interview them on this really complicated subject and talk to them about the complexity of it. And so it grew from there, and it's still going on. I've got a number of interviews on the archive. Part of the documentary went up a couple minutes from 2 interviews, which was my video on the incident at Exeter. Both these people were not veterans. Tom Muscarello and George Dufour. They were just talking about the incident at Exeter. But
The incident? You mean incident where Exeter is the town?
Yeah. So the incident was September 3rd in 1965, Exeter, New Hampshire. There was a guy going home. He was 18. His name was Norman Mascarello, and he was hitchhiking. He sold his car. He got drafted. He's going to go to Vietnam. And funny enough, he was also a Navy medic. And he was coming home from Amesbury, Massachusetts, visiting a girlfriend, and he saw something rise up from the trees. I described it as a big spherical red light. It scared the hell out of him, and at first he tried to get into a farmhouse, and he was knocking on the door. And so it's the middle of the night. You're going to wake somebody up, and then they have to get over to the door. So when nobody answered, he ran over and hid behind this rock wall. And a cop who was on duty at the time, Dave Hunt, he was driving by back towards town and saw Norman. And whatever the object is that he saw was gone at that point. Dave got out, went up to Norman, said, "Hey, why are you scared?" Norman was hysterical. He took Norman back to the police station in the center of town, which is now the town hall, where the festival every year for the incident occurs.
Oh, there's a whole festival around it.
Yeah, the New Hampshire UFO Fest, or the Exeter UFO. No, it's not that. It's the Exeter UFO Fest now.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, and funny enough, Tom Mascarello still lives there to this day, and George, and so he drove back, and then they only had 2 officers per shift at the time. So Gene Bertrand, the second officer on duty, answered a panic call on Route 1 from some old woman who saw what she described as the same thing as Norman, and it scared the hell out of her. And after he answered that call and came back to the station, and he was hearing Norman's story, which was similar to this old woman's story, he said to Dave, "Hey, maybe let's take Norman and go back." And they went back, and they described something rose up from the trees. They thought it was going to crash, and then it flew off. Even though the myth is it flew up, Gene shot at it, which never happened. On instinct, he grabbed his gun, and when he grabbed it, realized, "Oh, wait a minute, there's nothing I can do against this. This is massive."
That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, that
is. It's like, what is the thought process there? Like, well, it's not human, and I mean, really, you know what I mean? Like, I'll just shoot it. Screw it. Maybe nothing will happen, but I'll just shoot at it.
Screw it. Shoot that
You're
thing.
gonna be pretty scared.
Yeah. So, Gene and Dave, it was actually kind of funny because I thought they would have been completely freaked out with the report. They went back, gave the report. As far as I know, I think they only talked to the police about it. And it got out, and September 9th is when the paper was ran. And then afterwards, it blew up at that point. And this was 4 years after the Betty and Barney Hill incident.
Okay, yeah, because you did mention this was like around the time of the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah.
So this is going back quite a bit.
Yeah,
So
Pease Air Force
little
Base.
Little Exeter's not safe. Well, I don't know if it's little, but I guess it's not safe itself.
Nowadays, it's the size of a small city. But
what after the report? What did they think it was? Like, did they think it was like enemy, like forces, maybe, or did they think it was like what was like the investigation process like for that?
There wasn't really much of an investigation process. The reason why the incident was so big was because like every major news outlet got hold of it and it was showing up at Exeter. Other than that, it really, I mean, Gene and Dave were both very credible cops. They were formerly in the Air Force, so they knew a lot about aviation. And Gene was a very respectable person. He's a very social guy. He went around and talked to a lot of people. Dave, he was not a troublemaker, but he was a little more reserved and kept to himself. So that has fueled a lot of the credibility to both of them. They weren't bad cops. They never got in any trouble. But it was really how it got out to the media and how it blew up. A lot of people have investigated it, which is part of the reason why it's such a legendary case now in ufology. So there was a lot also surrounding it. I've not seen any officialized papers or reports for it, but there's a number of people that swear by it, that there are documentation that at Pease Air Force Base, which was a few miles up the road in the Greenland, Portsmouth area, that there was a radar operator that picked it up, and there was a guard on post. And so this is wartime. You don't abandon your post, or otherwise you're committing treason. And he ran off, abandoned posts, scared the shit out of him, and he ran away from that. So that was there was a number.
Familiar with like Bob Lazar and his story? So it sounds like you've been. It sounds almost like you study this. Like you like.
Yeah.
You started off with did you say parapsychology or just paranormal activity in general? Do you put that together with UFO sightings? Do you think they're one thing? Do you think it's like a metaphysical, or is UFOs more of like an actual, like something
UFOs are kind of funny. I've studied paranormal my whole life. It's always been like a recreational activity, is just to look at stuff. Like when I was a little kid, I looked at like haunted house books, and I was also a weirdo. I didn't watch cartoons. I'd watch like haunted New England documentaries and ghost hunters and stuff like that. So yeah, there's some very interesting stuff that surrounds UFOs, like especially now in 2019. The government has confirmed they're looking into UFOs. They have a confirmed department. They have public hearings every once in a while for it. In May this year, there was a public hearing that they held. UFOs are interesting too, because there's a lot of people that tie these very weird mythos to them, these very weird beliefs. There's a spiritualism that got tied into it, and that mostly got kicked off because of this one guy, Ray Hernandez, produced this study called Beyond UFO. And he's somebody who's convinced that UFOs, when you're abducted, it enhances your life and turns you into a mystic, which I will firmly argue against. I've met a lot of people. I've met a lot of people who have had an experience and they wish they haven't. They're still bothered, even if it was just seeing something. There's someone else I've interviewed for this documentary. His name's Peter Robbins, and he holds a podcast, Meanwhile Here on Earth. And he and his sister just saw a UFO, and they were just traumatized permanently by it.
What's traumatizing about seeing a UFO?
Um, I think it depends really on the person. I don't think there's some people like me who can handle probably seeing a UFO. I've never seen one. Um, because my immediate reaction is this a threat? Is this coming after me? Where there might be other people who could be more sensitive and from seeing it will question if they're sane or not. And
Okay.
so I would say that depends on the person. Peter said uh, it was impossible to comprehend for he and his sister. And they were fine up until about their 20s. And there's an interview with his sister done by Richard Dolan. Um, and for Peter and her, it was just like, this is impossible to look at. I can't comprehend that this is real. Why is this happening? Why am I looking at this?
So kind of like almost like a biblical experience.
I was
That
gonna
sounds
Yeah,
say,
like be not afraid, like wheels within wheels, angel type stuff.
well,
yeah.
So
people, yeah, go ahead.
with your own personal beliefs, do you think we've been visited by aliens before? Like, what is the evidence shown you that you've seen?
Um, I haven't seen. I'm like a see it to believe it myself kind of person. So, like, if you watch Ancient Aliens, there's a lot of they're getting into a lot of science now in these later seasons, where
Live
before it was
science.
just really goofy and it was just
Mm.
consistently seeing Giorgio Tsoukalos or David Childress saying in a really goofy way, "It has to be Ancient Aliens."
Yeah,
Um,
aliens.
or David Childress, I love that guy. He's like, "It has to be Ancient Aliens,
So many, yeah. The only
extraterrestrials."
let's just answer all the questions with one
Yeah,
word.
with that. And so now they're actually getting into legitimate science. So they're pulling out artifacts and they're examining it. Or Giorgio is at Pumapunku and sticks a compass on one of the stones, on one of the bricks, and somehow there's a certain magnetic property to it that causes the compass to go haywire, and it just
Mm.
spins nonstop. And this is a guy who's got like a PhD in alkaline metals. And when he's asked, "Do you know why it's doing this?" And he sits there and just shrugs and he goes, "I don't know." Um, or now they kind of have like a round table discussion. And there was one episode, I think it was the episode with William Shatner in it. And they're all sitting and they actually start to have a little bit of an argument over a couple of things. And he and Travis were going at it. And then he kind of ends that bit of the conversation with saying, it's like, it doesn't matter, really if aliens made it or not. It's lost engineering, it's lost technology. And today we can't recreate this stuff.
Well, I would love it's fun. William Shatner and Dan Aykroyd. It's maybe they're too old now, but they should have done like a podcast on just on UFOs and aliens because those two guys they love
Are,
that
are
stuff.
great.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And on their interview, that's all they want to talk about
Yeah.
is crystal skulls and ancient aliens and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have
But
And
you?
to answer your question quickly, Zach,
mm,
um, I haven't seen evidence that says we've been visited or evidence that convinces me that we've been visited. There's
Okay.
weird shit out there. There's a lot of weird stuff. There was one
Yeah.
episode, I would actually have to even look into the science to be personally convinced this is true, but there was one episode where they pulled out a piece of metal in a museum, and there were certain bits to it that they say this only happens to metal if it sits for millions of years. Now, whether or not if that's true, they claim it's an archaeological mystery that no one's been able to truly understand why that piece is there and why that occurrence, that piece of metal has occurred. Um, but there's actually a lack, from my studies, there's a sufficient lack of evidence that says we're visited. And I'm a hard evidence kind of person. Could
Yeah.
these extraterrestrial crafts be of an extraterrestrial origin? Um, there's a high probability right now because technologically, according to what we're seeing and experiencing with our current means of transportation, something that is instantaneously start and stop
Right.
propulsion system, and something that is a round ball, the size of a small room, um, that can go faster than our top jets. And at the same time, if our jets get close enough, it scrambles their radars. Uh, that is, by our current technological means, impossible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a high
So it's like, what's
probability.
your explanation? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But until
When
we
it
pull
comes
a
to like
body
ancient,
out of a craft that's not human, I'm going to have to argue no in the meantime.
I
I'm
feel like
open
an
to that
alien could just
possibility.
walk down the street and no one would notice. Be this really good cosplay. Like, what if an alien visited Comic Con? Like, who would
yeah.
know? You know what I
Well,
mean?
I'd love
and
that.
beyond that, like, why would an alien send itself? Why not send some kind of droid or a remote controlled
Yeah.
craft? Like, why be in the craft when it's so dangerous?
Well, that's what Bob Lazar talked about on Joe Rogan and in his documentary. I believe Bob Lazar. Like, I'm
Yeah,
like you, I'm a hard evidence guy, but his story to me is convincing. Whether or not
it
every
is.
detail is
And
true,
he's
but he
also,
talked about that. Like,
yeah,
they're not alive. Like the pilots are they're androids or they're drones of some type. Like
Yeah.
they're synthetic beings. They're not. So they're aliens. They're aliens of aliens, if you want to think of it that way.
aliens of aliens.
Yeah.
Yes, send our aliens towards that Earth planet to
Yeah, it
go
might be
do that
rough. You know
thing.
what I mean?
Well,
Yeah,
it's such a
exactly.
long travel, right? Like, there's nothing in our observable space that we know about that has life, right? Like, we've looked at all these different, like, within our solar system, there's nothing, and beyond that, we don't know. So the amount of time that it would take to get here, regardless of your propulsion systems, if it's like you would have to literally bend the space time fabric, right? You'd have to bend that in order to make it feasible for like a person, at least, I mean, for their lifetime to get there. With how the way that time works is that, like, my now is different from a billion light years away is now. Like, our now doesn't line up, so we can't like look at them and see.
We can't wave, in
Yeah,
real time.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah, well,
as
even
far as we know, yeah, but
yeah,
that could be different. I mean, they could have, like, let's just say theoretically, there's aliens on planet X. I mean, they could have figured out a means of teleportation that's instantaneous, where they can just pick a star system on the map and go, all right, we're gonna go there. Just click this button and fire this thing, and 5 minutes they're here.
yeah, right. Like, strip yourself down to just data so that you don't have to worry about the limitations of light. Like, you can travel faster than that at that point, because you're not really transferring what do you call that, matter, you're transferring data.
I always used to think I used to have this thought where like I was watching the movie They Live. You guys have all seen that, right?
Oh, I love that
Like
movie.
Oh,
One of
yeah,
the
everybody
best
loves it,
fight
right?
scenes of all time.
All my favorite by far. That's my favorite. Like
it's such a
that alley. That shit goes on for like 10 minutes,
it
dude.
is, yeah.
And can you imagine being? I was thinking, like, can you imagine being the Foley artist? Like, you just punch in this bag of sand for like 10 minutes. Like, oh my god, my hands are raw. But no, like in that movie, when they show how the aliens teleport between like their homeworld and Earth, I was always thinking about that too. Like, well, technically, it's just data. So really, what they should be doing is just creating a virtual version of themselves at a monitor at a kiosk on another planet, right? And they would never have to travel. So like,
Right.
if you were doing, God, could you imagine being like an inner office like person and you just have to deal with yourself all day, like doing paperwork on Earth while you're on Beta Prime or whatever, and like, and you have to deal with yourself. Like, could you work with yourself? That's kind of a weird segue, but I'm just thinking about that now. Like, if I had to work with myself, how well would it go? Like, if it was a
Yeah,
non-competitive situation.
I think I can work with myself. Maybe I get annoyed here and there, but for the most part, be all right.
You're gonna, yeah. So we do this, Garrett. We jump around, or at least it happens. Oh yeah, we both do this.
It's all good.
Yeah,
we just
It's all
steer out
good.
on something like, hey, this thought goes to that thought. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no
So,
worries. It's fun.
yeah, no, I find it very interesting what you're doing, and especially you know, especially the fact that you investigate like paranormal activity and UFOs and things like that. Because I grew up watching, or rather listening to Art Bell, and when I was a teenager in the '90s, I was very much into investigating things that I felt like, or at least I thought maybe enough science hasn't been done for it, right? So like out of body experiences, you know, astral projection, which is basically the same thing, UFOs, ghosts. Because I used to suffer from night terrors. I've talked about that before on the show too. So when you mentioned like the army veteran who used to see like dead people in the form of a shadow, I saw that. I've even been attacked by them, like, you know, like trying to stab me and like freeze you in the middle of the night kind of shit. Like it's
Yeah.
very weird.
Or you
Like,
wake up
and
from a nightmare and you're still seeing it.
yeah, that's way more terrifying, right?
Yeah,
And
no, that happened to me.
it is kind of cool. Yeah.
I have this one funny story, and it was really funny because I had this ex that got to see it. I woke up in the middle of the night from this nightmare where there was like I just remember there's like specifically like tentacles just like breaking through, coming down from the ceiling, and I wake up losing my shit, and she's just like watching me laughing as I'm
That sucks.
scared shitless that tentacles are trying to kill me.
Yeah, that would make me judge my partner.
Yeah.
Like Cthulhu just tried to kidnap me for who knows what nefarious means, and you laughed. It's not cool, man.
Well, she was used to it at that point, so.
Oh yeah. Well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, the brain is a part. That's like after, like, because I was studying witchcraft, I even tried the exercises for astral projection. I had a weird experience with it, but in the end, what I found was that just it was my brain. Like the power of the human mind is, I mean, it's a matrix simulator, right? I mean, even
It
what
is,
we're
yeah.
doing right now is technically an emulation of reality. You know.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
your
the brain's a
consciousness.
fascinating thing, and we understand so little of it. And part of what makes it so interesting is it's always trying to adapt to whatever's going on. So funny
Yeah.
enough is computers are actually modeled after what we think our brain is.
Right.
And so your brain is always updating itself. And so that was, for people that like hearing about brain stuff, you can look up the case of Phineas Gage. He was somebody who a steel railroad pipe or an iron railroad pipe just like went through his eye, went right through his brain. And he was working on a railroad in Vermont, and they were putting dynamite, and he had a rod for packing. And what happened was he was smoking a cigar, and part of it went to the hole where the dynamite was, and it caused it to explode.
That doesn't sound very smart.
Which sounds like something that would happen during that time period.
That's like Wile E. Coyote, man. Yeah,
it is like Wile E. Coyote, and
just
so
smoke it.
yeah, exactly. And so they dragged him off to the nearest hotel, which is like the only place where they could find a doctor at the time, which was like 2 towns over or something. And they thought he was going to die. And it turned out that he managed to get up, or he was still functional in bed. Like he was still holding conversation, still talking to people. And he lived the rest of his life.
They say that it's like, yeah, as I say, they said his demeanor changed completely. Like he became a little more violent and stuff like that, and more prone to outbursts and things.
I never heard of Phineas Gage.
Well,
that's
maybe
interesting.
you need to do some homework, Mark.
It's like one of the most famous cases about like how complex the brain is and how they try and figure out where things are stored, because like he was missing like a good portion of it, but was still able to function, and for the most part seemed unchanged, but different things about his personality had changed.
Yeah, I know he became more vulgar and lethargic. Yeah, so Phineas, I don't know if he was prone to, like, I didn't read anything if he was prone to any violent outbursts or whatever, but I just know that he became more lethargic. He was vulgar. He started becoming vulgar. He was not the promising he was not the promising young man he used to be. Now he's kind of like halfway to being a bum.
Well, that's kind of like, I mean, like Gary Busey suffered a major like head injury
Yeah.
on a motorcycle when he was younger, and he survived it. Like they gave him like a 1 or 2% chance, however they calculate that. But basically, they thought he was going to die, and he survived it. And he has been active still, like in movies and shows and stuff like that. But you can literally just see his mental degrade over time, and he suffered the same thing, like weird acts of like violence or just like aggressiveness that that for him seemed like a natural transition, but to anyone around him was just like, whoa, man, like somebody pinch you, like what the fuck,
Yeah.
but I find
Yeah.
that, what I find the most interesting is people get injured and then they become like, I don't know what you call it, like a mini savant. Like I
Superhuman.
I watch a lot of stuff on this. One of my favorites was this guy who was just playing basketball in Harlem with his buddies, like on a summer day, right? So it's like all these dudes playing basketball, and he tripped or he got checked and he hit his head on the concrete, and he was in a coma for like 2 or 3 days. And when he woke up, he could remember any date after that. Like if you told him, if you asked him like when a team played, what the weather was like, everything, it was like recorded, like just like per every little detail in his head. He could tell you the president, like if you said, okay, who was the president on such and such date, or like who was on TV, like it was crazy. You could just spit it out instantly,
Yeah.
like a computer.
Yeah. It's
So that kind of shit, I
interesting.
think, is kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard similar things about people with like musicians, right? Becoming like,
Oh yeah.
like after a major injury or something like that, like to the mind or to the brain, they become like expert musicians on like the violin or piano or something like that.
Do you think if we knew like the trick, like if like like with the ball peen hammer, if we knew the right angle to hit someone, and it was like let's say like something high, like a 30% chance, let's say a third, like a 33% chance that if this professional hits you with a ball peen hammer, that was your chance of becoming like a super genius or a vegetable the rest of your life, would you take it?
It's a 30% chance of
33,
success.
33. So it's a
Of
third.
That
success.
sounds like a
Yeah,
skit right
success.
there. That's honest. That
No,
just
you
sounds
can
like a
do it.
Saturday Night
That's
Live
great.
skit. Like, all right, what kind of genius do you want to be? I want to become a musical genius. Okay, you're gonna have to lay on your left side, and
Yeah, it's like a chiro, like a
yeah,
like a
then he
really
like
violent
hits it, and he's like,
chiropractor.
vegetable. Sorry. All right, next.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I would take that shit, dude.
A
33%.
33%
That's a
chance
high,
of
dude.
success,
That's like winning the lottery.
or
33%
you're a
chance.
vegetable.
Yeah,
That is not a high chance.
yeah. But let's say, okay, I'll throw you a bone. Like, say that if you are a vegetable, you're also like you're out of the game mentally. Like it's like
How does that help? That sounds
so you
way
don't know
worse.
you're suffering.
Yes,
I mean, everyone
worse.
else around you suffers, which is shit, but you don't know you're suffering.
That sounds worse. You're
It
not
sounds
making this
worse.
any better.
Well,
I'd
just you
do it
got to
for
take a
like
risk, dude.
for like an 85% chance. I'd probably that would
Oh,
make
that's
me
so
think.
safe though. Well, who wouldn't take that chance?
People, I still might not take it. That's enough to make me think about seriously taking it. But I still might not take that chance. Vegetable, I would like. I don't. That's like my biggest fear is being trapped in my own body.
Oh, dude, yeah, for sure. There's a story of a guy, I can't remember. You're good with names. I'm terrible. Um, this guy suffered a injury when he was like 12 or 13, right? And it
Mhm.
was like in a pool or something, and it put him in a coma, and it like paralyzed him. And he was in that coma for like another 10 or 11 years or whatever it was. And then he woke up, and they think until his case, think about it, this is like in modern times, because this guy's alive. He wrote a book after he came out of it and everything, told his story. And it's something like The Sleeping Boy or something like that. But he was awake, he was conscious in his body that whole time, and just recording all the terrible thoughts and things, watching his family, like basically like parts of his family just give up on him because they think he's dead. And the doctors and nurses and experts are all telling him, his family and friends, that look, anyone in his condition, they're not there, they're gone. Like it's just the body operating, but the mind is gone. But they never really knew that. And then because of his case, his scenario, now they have a new look on it. But can you imagine all the people that have suffered by being trapped and then dying in their own body, and God knows what happened, because weird shit happened to him too. He was abused sexually, even though it's just weird, like all these terrible things. He had bad nurses, people don't care, that they poked him or played with his body in weird ways, like all this stuff. Like it's an amazing story, you know what I mean? Like that is like by far, I don't know what's funny, but because I've experienced it. Technically I've been in a coma twice in my life. One from an injury, which was like a 12 and a half, 13-hour coma. And the other one was when I had back pain. The only time in my life I had like severe back pain. This doctor gave me just like trial samples of like this sleep aid. And I'd never taken a sleeping aid in my life. And he kept me awake for 6.5 hours straight in my mind, but my body was asleep. I couldn't move. I literally could not move. I was frozen for 6.5 hours, and my body was watching the clock, counting the minutes, losing my mind. So I can't imagine, over a decade of being trapped in this dead body that used to be you. And then waking up and living a life, like a rich life, like writing a book, becoming, famous. Like that's so, man, that's crazy.
That's
so you wouldn't do that for 33% chance?
No.
Damn. All right.
That's way too low.
All right.
Of not being trapped in my body.
Okay.
There's not enough wealth in the world.
Man.
Oh man, a superpower. But anyway,
it's a weird but interesting thought.
Right. So I guess we're similar then in the sense that we seem like very kind of like logically grounded people, but we're really interested in paranormal or like unknown things, like unsolved mysteries. There used to be a show called Unsolved Mysteries. I used to love that.
It came back for a little while. Whoever the guy who played, it's Zach something. He played Spock in the new Star Trek movies.
Okay.
Oh, that guy. I know what you're talking about. He did the show. That's interesting.
Yeah, he brought it back.
Huh.
There's some interesting. He definitely did a good job with it, or whoever was involved with it did a good job with that show. So yeah, it was fascinating. He did what is it? He did one specifically on the dead when he was talking about the Mel meter, and he did some pretty crazy stuff on that show. Like he went to this, like I can't remember what the technical term for it is, but he went to like this place where people donate their bodies or their body parts when they die.
Mm.
But like everything is wrapped up and you can tell what shape it is. Like you can see like, oh, that's the shape of a head. That's the shape of a hand, even though it's in like plastic wrap. It was really intense.
Like Walmart Halloween wrapping on body parts.
Yeah. It's all like white sheets, but you can see the outline clearly. Yeah. He did a few other things. He did one on, I think it was one on time travel where he did investigating. He went all the way up to Champlain and talked to the woman who took the champ photo. And he was
the champ photo.
So in Vermont, there's Lake Champlain. I don't recommend going to it because it's filled with various forms of flesh-eating bacteria.
Oh man.
Yeah. Some of it's like straight out of a horror movie too. Like you'll get it and there's no swelling or bleeding. Your flesh just starts to dissolve. Ooh. I don't know how fast it dissolves your flesh, but it's like, holy shit. And which freaked me out. Like the time I found that out, like when I was driving up there to go do audio for a horror movie called Water Horse. And so I'm like holding all of this like audio equipment on a dock at one point, and I'm like, I pray to God that they don't ask me to jump in the water at any point or get too close. It was like really freaky. So yeah, it was like, it looks kind of like the Loch Ness Monster, that picture. And it's considered Lake Champlain's Loch Ness Monster or something like that. But they call it Champ. That's the name of it. Like if you type in like 1970s, or I think it's like 1974 Champ photo, it'll pop up. I think 1974 was when it was taken. But there's a lot of quartz. There's quartz pockets underneath Lake Champlain. And so a lot of paranormal people have this, paranormal investigators or theorists have these theories that quartz under enough pressure could potentially trigger time travel.
Wow, that is far out.
Yeah.
Like the crystal quartz, the rock.
Yeah. Certain kinds of quartz crystals. I don't remember what type of quartz crystal it is. Trying to remember off the top of my head.
So it triggers time travel of what? Like it's like locally, like a pocket dimension kind of thing, or that's such a man. Like
No, I'm trying to remember every theory. There's one theory where it's like it's only like opening a window for a moment, where you can just kind of look through or step through just for a second, or it's partial time travel, or it's like sideways, or it's like side dimension stepping or something like that. I think it was like interdimensional. Yeah, there's one, but a lot of these are like kind of big random jump theories too, like stuff you'd
That's
probably
kind
see
of a
on
cool
Gaia.
idea, though.
Hmm?
I just got it. That just gave me a great idea, like for like like a Ray Bradbury story. Like there's a house of glass or windows, let's say, and when you go in there, you're viewing people from the past or the future, but you can't ever visit them or hear them. You can just watch them. So it's almost like a window people can walk up to and like wave, and stuff like that. And it's like live, but you can never, like, if you break the glass, it's gone forever. You can never like go and visit or
That'd
go.
be
It's
kind of
not a
cool.
portal, but it's just that's all it is, like a museum for the past or the future. Don't
There's
steal that. It's mine.
words. There's a theoretical camera somebody supposedly had that allowed you to look back into the past. What was the name of it? I gotta look this up now.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. What is it? It's like a something graph, I think. Chronograph.
Chronograph.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
chronos.
Yeah,
I want to
that's the name
say
of it.
chronoscope, but
Chronoscope, maybe. Yeah. Something like that.
Oh, the video game. That's that's all I know for Chronoscope.
oh
RPG
yeah, it's based off
from
of
Super
Dungeons and
Nintendo.
Dragons.
Yeah,
All right, time travel.
yeah, I'm a genius if it's related to fantasy lore.
Yeah.
Then I know it.
Let's see. Yeah, because there's the supposed Jesus pictures. I can pull that. I'm able to pull that up. I can't pull the name up. The time travel photos. The Vatican. What is it? Hold on. Supposedly, there's a theory that the Vatican had this camera, or has a camera that allows them to look into the past. I wonder
I
if
wonder if that
Charlie
goes
Sheen's got
along.
a
I wonder
chronovisor.
if
That's it. The chronovisor.
Chronovisor.
Chronovisor. I wonder if that's what Charlie Sheen used when he was a Vatican assassin.
You think Charlie Sheen is a Vatican assassin? Is that what he said?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh,
Remember
I
when
didn't
he
know
went
what he
all
said either.
crazy?
I was like,
And he was
your
saying that
joke.
in like 2012. He's like, I'm a Vatican assassin. I drink tiger's blood.
Oh,
He said
dude,
that. That's so funny.
I love Charlie Sheen, even though he's sick. He's always been a favorite actor of mine too. Like I like his
Yeah.
movies,
Yeah,
but yeah, I missed that. I missed the whole Charlie Sheen craze. That was fun, man.
that
I
was.
thought so.
He was he was bipolar. He was bi winning.
He's by winning, dude. The blood of the donors' ancestors. There's so many great quotes. That's the thing too. Like he should have wrote that shit down. Well, I guess it's on TV. Or
I like the songified interview with him.
Oh yeah,
That was so
I
good.
forgot
the
about
Melody
that.
Sheep.
It's Shmoyo.
Shmoyo.
Yeah.
I like the way that sounds.
Yeah. God, now I want to ask him that question. Did you use the
Do you think
chronovisor when you were a Vatican assassin?
Do you think so? I've often thought about that. Like, would we get to a point where we could interview like celebrities, and would we want to?
What, people from the past?
No.
Oh.
I'm just like now, like in the present, like celebrities in the present. Like, if we could get Charlie Sheen, why wouldn't we talk to him? Right?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I'd interview Charlie Sheen if I got the chance.
That'd be kind of a cool interview series, like former stars, like people that were big once and then had like fallen off the map.
Oof.
Oh yeah,
Like
so like
Charlie Sheen or like Brendan Fraser before he came back, and trying to think of others, but I'm really bad with names, especially celebrities.
Yeah,
There's plenty of them
Fraser.
out there that used to be huge and famous and big, and then they just kind of fall off out of nowhere. Like Liam Neeson. Like, when's the last time he did anything?
Well, he's still making movies. He's making really bad movies right now. Yeah. The last one I saw, and he's made some since, but there was one on Netflix. It was like an ice trucker movie, and it just had, really bad CGI and just a really, really dumb plot. And even Neeson himself was just he just was collecting a check. He looked like a guy. He looked literally like an actor just showing up for work. You know what I mean? I'm like, what is this movie? Like,
Was it
what was
Honest
the point of this
Thief?
movie? Huh?
Was it Honest Thief? This is the last movie I heard of that he was doing.
No. This movie's probably a year or two old now, but it's the last one of his that I watched.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
Honest Thief was like 2018, I think. Yeah, because that was when I was on 2018. Yeah, I think it was 2018. 20, yeah,
No, he's still
2018.
making movies. He's gonna be a oh man, I can't remember what I read. I saw a thing about him being in. He might be joining the MCU. He might be in the Marvel universe as
Everybody.
a
Oh,
major
Harrison
character.
Ford just joined.
Yeah, the Red Hulk. We were just talking about that. He's
It
supposed to be
sounds
the Red
so
Hulk. Yeah,
sounds so weird.
I mean they're gonna need like a lot of CGI because he's what? He's almost in his 80s, isn't he?
Yeah.
Harrison Ford.
He looks pretty
I mean,
Yeah, I
big.
don't know
He's
what
been
they're gonna
working out a
do.
lot. I saw a picture of him just yesterday. He's in the news. Yeah,
it's crazy at their age.
that was considered big news on local news yesterday. It's like Channel 10, and they're showing this picture of him, and he looks like he's been working out a lot. Why
Well,
is he
I mean,
doing
you reach an
no?
age too that like the fact that you're still alive is kind of like a thing, right? It's like, wow, this guy that you used to see, he's alive still. It's like your brain's kind of like, oh wow, there's hope.
Yeah, right. It's like Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I don't know. She was like 90 plus, right?
She's like
It's crazy.
96, 97.
Was
She's
she?
really old.
Mhm.
Really old.
That's all right. I want to make it to 100.
I thought you said you want to be like 120 or
I don't know.
something.
I want to get to 112, but if I
Oh,
can, but
112.
I know I'm gonna make it to 100,
I want to go for 150.
150.
I just want to see.
We'll
I
go
just want
with
to see
it.
how long I can go. Doesn't matter if
I
I'm like
guess I want to live.
207 and life is boring. As long as I can see how far I can go.
Yeah, for sure.
That would yeah. As long as you have your mind though too, that's important. Like if you don't have your
Yeah,
mind, you're not a traveler anymore. You're just a victim, right? So
Yeah.
that matters more than the body. Like the rest of the body is just the brain.
it's like you're a stationary bike, but the world travels around you.
Yeah, you're like the dog in Futurama. You just stand on the same street corner.
Oh, so sad.
No one cares about you.
It's so sad.
Sorry, man.
This is the saddest episode they got.
Yeah,
That one hits
yeah.
hard.
I know it's like
Yeah, what is?
17
Why do
years you
people
just
love?
sat on that corner.
Yeah, 17 or 112.
112.
Suck.
Yeah.
Like, why do you? You know, I've often thought about that. Like, I love dogs. I love all animals, but it's why are we so enamored with dogs? I mean,
They're
Because dogs are
expressive.
like probably the simplest animal. Like if you think about it, like you can train a dog to literally just sit in one spot of your house all day long. Cats, not going to happen. They're going to like scratch
mm,
things and run outside and go hunt shit. And then parrots, they're in cages. You have to be around them, or otherwise they're going to rip their feathers out. Um, Other animals require so much, and dogs don't, and they're happy with it.
mm.
They're just like happy with anything.
They're
Well,
just
they're
yeah.
also they have eyebrows, right? So they're more expressive.
Oh
Yeah, well,
yeah,
because eyebrows are the hands of the face. That's how you communicate. If you don't have like it's like I learned that in animation, right? It's like it's really hard to show expression and emotion without an eyebrows,
Mm,
without those muscles in your face to make and a
that's a good point.
surprised look to make any kind of like inquiry in your face.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest things in acting is your face. You have to use your You have to use your face for so much to convey so much emotion.
Oh
So you,
yeah.
Especially
so you
like
said
all the really
no.
good actors too, because
Well,
know.
that's where you can tell where people are lying. Is if there's a disconnect from the words in the face, then they're lying. You can tell that they're not being honest about something. Either they don't truly feel that way, or they're just straight up telling you a fabrication. Like something about them is off if they're not expressing properly.
Yeah, it's also a key thing in trauma too. What I found. So like you can see it. There's one key scene in, I don't know if you've heard about Demi Lovato having a UFO show.
No.
So
Wow, that's
so Demi Lovato went ahead and had this show about being abducted. Demi claimed there was some kind of extraterrestrial experience, um, and so when Demi's talking about it to someone, I think it's a hypnotherapist. Yeah, there's this part
Okay.
when Demi's talking about it, and it's a traumatic experience, but yet she's like smiling and like really chipper. And
Huh.
that's also a key thing. Is I think it's a defensive mechanism to like avoid
Yeah.
that stress to avoid that negative feeling like, oh, this is a terrible thing, but I'm going to giggle and be really happy so I don't get stressed about it.
Oh yeah, it's like a if you're ever stressful and you smile, your body will kind of like relax because it's like you can't be happy and stressed at the same time. So
Yeah.
you're whatever you're forcing upon your body is going to take precedence. It's
Yeah.
the same thing with like eating. If you like take like if you start eating while you're nervous or something too, you're not going to be eating when you're stressed out or being chased by a lion. So your body's like, oh, I guess we're okay.
Yeah. Or
What
some
about
people
that
have a nervous
dopamine
laugh.
or adrenaline hit? It's like that's what controls us.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yep.
But I've been falling down that rabbit hole of like YouTube videos too. You know, it's like how much our Neanderthal brain, because we're just ancient predators like humans. You know what I mean? We're still adapting to this modern world that we've created, or that most of us didn't create, but we're born into. Right? Like you said, the mind is always adapting. So it's kind of weird to think that, you know, the jungle is this modern world that other humans have created for us to live in, that we have to manage, maintain, and survive, you know. And it's so different. Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I go out and into like the further I get from society, the more at home I feel, like with myself, the more at peace I become too. It's very
Yeah.
strange. It's not like something I think about. It just sort of happens. You know, that's
That's
why I
why a
love
lot of
hiking.
people, yeah, because a lot of people really like that, that isolation or going out into nature. Like that's why like nature retreats or hiking or camping is so popular, because you're out and your brain suddenly shifts. There's less overstimulation because you just have to look out for weather and predators, as opposed to being in a city where you're on sensory overload. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people,
Oh man,
and
I
it's
mean,
unpredictable. You don't know if
yeah.
like a crackhead's going to whip out a gun and just start shooting into a crowd, or someone's going to go off the rails, or truck's going to spin out of control and like start like accidentally like mowing people down on the sidewalk.
Oh yeah, I mean, just the noise alone of a city can be overwhelming, for sure. Just the sounds,
Yeah, there's people that take medicine for that. I forget what that condition's called actually. Like people,
anxiety.
I guess, yeah,
Yeah,
but they live in, you know, that's something that some people that like live in cities, like especially like apartment buildings and stuff like that, you know, I can totally get that. I can totally see that. I'm lucky, I guess, for myself. I can say that I've always found some way to manage the crazy, you know what I mean, the anxiety. But definitely, I can understand how some people need help. I guess we all do in some way, you know, one way or another. You got to find some kind of aid, you know, to get through this noise of life, whatever you want to call it. We
Yeah,
talk about that shit so much though, because it just really is a topic that you know you can never stop talking about. Is, you know, modernity, like just the technological world we live in and how it affects us. Like we're still learning that too, right? I mean, even the technology we're using right now is pretty new. I mean, it's
yeah,
our generation that got introduced to it first.
oh
You know what I
yeah. I
mean?
could imagine as a kid like having like this opportunity to talk to someone in Maine face to face, nearly. You know, like this is insane.
I
Yeah.
This is
know.
such a cool experience that we were able to have.
Yeah,
I mean, even like 100, not even 100 years ago, there was no telephone, right? So it's like you couldn't even like call someone to do this. There was no way to record it. There was no way to do any of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So it's crazy to think that the leaps that technology has made and how fast it is, and laws and society can't keep up with the pace of technology, right? So you're always like being exposed to this relatively new thing, and you don't know how to react to it in like
exactly.
in a healthy way. Like what's the benefits and what's the drawbacks? There's always going to be both, right?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting thing to talk about. I used to teach film at one point, and yeah, I mean film. The earliest movies ever made were made in 1894. I mean, if you really think about it under the scope of how long humans have been here and how long human society's been around, that's like nothing. It's
Hmm.
100. We're almost at 120. We're at like 118 years right now, just about,
For
and
film.
or 132, 128 years, 118 or 128 years. I can't remember math. Yeah, 128 years. So that is such a new technology, and it started out with you have celluloid film, and you get maybe 30 seconds out of it. Maybe you might get a 30-second clip. And because the technology was so bad, Thomas Edison had to create a giant black box, a studio, where he had to flip the roof open, and there's only certain times of day that they could film, because that was when the sunlight was at its strongest, directly on the studio.
Huh.
And
That's pretty
now,
cool.
yeah, now we're getting into cameras that can capture at nighttime light, like the human eye can adjust to night, and that's like starting
Oh,
to come into your phone.
oh yeah, you're not
Yeah.
even going to need cameras pretty soon. Like I've been sending Zach, this guy on TikTok does deep fakes, right? With like mostly like with Arnold Schwarzenegger and like Sylvester Stallone, but he does the voices too. But it's not even voice acting; it's a program that just mimics, copies the sound. Like anybody, almost anybody, I would presume, can like record themselves, and then the program, the software, will make them sound like that celebrity that had their voice, coded. And it's like, that's crazy. So
Yeah.
eventually you can, like, that's what I want to know though, too. Cause I saw a student film product a long, long time ago before all this deep fake stuff. So whoever did it was a master. I don't know where they're at now, but it's lost to obscurity, but it was an Alfred Hitchcock scene. I forget. There's a movie, several movies have, what's his name? The actor, not Dean Martin, um, Cary Grant. So Cary Grant was in several like North by Northwest. He's in several like Hitchcock movies as well. And there was one where Cary Grant is the main character, and the film is not, the story is not that great, but the movie is famous because Hitchcock filmed it all in one take. There's no cuts. There's no edits. The whole movie is one take. So
Okay.
all the lines, everything. So it's really interesting to watch because you can kind of pick out the mistakes, if you want to call them that, even though
Oh,
Cary
there's always
Grant was
mistakes.
acting.
Every
Sure.
movie there is mistakes in it.
Right. It's
Yeah,
unavoidable, right? But what
it
was
is.
interesting was that the
Yeah.
scene that I saw was fake. I thought I was watching the original movie, but it was fake because obviously Cary Grant is dead. So everything was created in a computer space and in a CGI basically, including Cary Grant's voice, and that blew my mind. So it made me think, like, even then, when are we going to bring dead actors back to life for film,
I mean,
like for
we already
full
did with
roles?
like Carrie Fisher and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, do we need
Disney
to?
actually owns the likeness rights of a lot of like dead celebrities too, like Dean Martin and I think like Michael Jackson and things like that. Like they own like the rights of
That's
their
crazy.
likeness, and they can use them in any kind of media source that they want. If they want to do ads with them, if they want to do even if it's just photography, you can just use old photos of them, but they can actually like replicate the way they look now. They have 3D models, if you will.
That's, yeah, that, man, the future's gonna be cool, and probably shitty at the same time, but
Hologram
we'll
Tupac
find out.
on
Yeah, we'll
tour.
see. I don't know.
Yeah.
So so you've been working. I remember you telling me that you used to work at a TV station in Exeter. Is that correct?
Yes, I was working there until about August 9th of this year. I resigned to go pursue some other projects.
And have you always been? I mean, it sounds like you're really into film. Obviously, you used to teach film. So are you just kind of shooting out in all directions and seeing what you can do? Like, as like, what I'm asking is, do you find there's more interest in your documentaries and your interviews, or do you want to go into something like you mentioned, horror movies and making movies and things like that?
Uh, I mean, that was what I initially set out to do, is to go make all these narratives. Like, I want to do like fantasy movies and horror and crazy action films and all sorts of like fun nonsense. But it wasn't until I was at Emerson College when I, for we're taking a science class because we have to take we had to take our credentials, but uh, our projects were all media, so we get to pick a subject and then we would go make a project on it. So I did a final on childhood cancer, and it might be somewhere out there still on YouTube.
Oh,
Uh,
like online? Okay.
Yeah, it's called Life of a Single Cell. And I found the very first chemo patient, Allison DuPont, and interviewed her. And that
That's
changed,
interesting.
yeah, that changed my perspective on doing documentaries. Because back then, um, digital technology was like really starting to pick up. This is like 2012, 2013. Um, and so this is before YouTube decided it was going to make a studio, right before it, and right
Mm-hmm.
before a lot of the podcast stuff really exploded as well. Um, so I did that, and I decided, like, all right, well, maybe there might be more I might want to do, because my goal always was to do my own stuff. But when I was growing up, I heard you're going to have to go to LA, maybe New York. And then I
Right.
saw YouTube for the first time. I was like in seventh grade, and I was staying over at a friend's place, and he showed me this crazy website where I get to see like original made videos and people making their own content. And this is like in some guy's backyard out in like the Midwest, or just some place that you never would have expected it otherwise if it weren't for um, the internet. And that was when I knew, I'm like, all right, this is going to be my platform. I wasn't expecting at that point I was going to be, like a big celebrity, or multi-million dollar making filmmaker. But I knew, I was like, okay, well, I'll be able to go ahead and figure out my thing living in Maine, and I'll be able to make movies. And that was what I watch. I mean, this is still what I watch to this day, is like B movies and no budget films, and because
I
at the
feel like those
time,
have the most heart usually too,
Mm.
like
yeah,
the B films.
yeah. So I mean, if you watch Asylum, which I think they were behind these last three Halloween movies, was supposed to be the final trilogy, I think. Um,
Asylum is
they made
based on
Sharknado.
Halloween. Oh God,
I
Yeah,
love Sharknado.
I
really?
Yeah,
know.
they're so silly.
Oh
They're
God.
ridiculous. I
Yeah,
love them.
they're ridiculous. It's fun.
The only way I was able to sit through Sharknado was listening to riff tracks, just chew it up,
They
destroy it.
go into space. What's not to love?
Was that a sequel? I don't remember that.
Yeah,
The first one.
Yeah.
there's like the fourth one. They go into space and shit. It's so good.
Oh
Man,
Oh,
yeah.
it's ridiculous.
Like I think it's just because so many people were like ripping on it. The first one, like the first one was just made, and it was just like the one of the worst movies of all time. But then after that, because so many people were talking about it and it blew up, um, that's when, like, oh, let's capitalize off this. Let's make a sequel. Let's make a third movie. Let's make a fourth. Let's make a fifth, and we'll make the fifth the final one. And it was so big. It was so big in Deadpool 2. They talked about it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan
You know what's funny
Reynolds.
to
What
me
Sharknado
is
are
that
we on in the future? If you're from the future, what Sharknado are we on?
yeah, and it's basically what? It's basically a Bollywood movie made in the West. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. At
Yeah, I mean,
Sharknado. It's someone just like, you know what? We should just do our version of
over the top action.
over the
Yeah,
top action, sliding horses and flying trucks and shit.
sliding
Yeah.
horses. Yeah,
Yeah. And that stuff's really cool. I mean, it has its own place. It's like, it's fun just to flip on something stupid like that, when,
It is true.
so you
Yeah,
can
like
forget
those
for
kind of
2 hours
movies. Yeah,
about Russia invading the Ukraine and threatening us with
I know,
nuclear
right?
weapons.
We were talking about that the other day, or I brought it up. It's just like because I missed the early days of YouTube when you could watch. There was no censorship, so you could watch like backyard wrestling and people actually getting hurt. Like all this kind of crazy
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
And there was just all this like you said, man, I wish I'd gotten in on it because I was, I was working in plastic surgery at the time, and it was like early 2000s. And one of my first videos on YouTube, if not my very first video, was an Oblivion video I made, right? And it was just like simple, like Windows Movie Maker, like editing. It was nothing special, but it got like a couple 100,000 views, and I didn't realize back then that's like significant, right? So
Yeah.
now that video is like copyrighted, right? I don't think it's even like up anymore, but for whatever dumb reason, it didn't click with me that I was just mildly impressed. I just marveled at it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. 200,000 people viewed my video. I didn't think
that's pretty good.
realize how I could have been a Mr. Beast or a Joe Rogan, didn't realize it because you know that they got in at the beginning. So
Yeah.
when it was all good,
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Well, I think
it
there's
was,
still opportunity for new people to get big. You know, it's just because like people are always cycling through. You know, it's like
yeah.
yeah,
any other kind of industry.
And
You don't
there's
have to be at the
opportunities.
forefront.
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's now opportunities for people to be able to make videos and, make a living off of it. You don't have to be huge and be, making,
That's the goal.
yeah,
Independence. That's
yeah,
the goal.
exactly.
Yeah.
You can have,
I think
a degree of independence now that YouTube's got a whole monetizing system where you can just, if you have X number of subscribers and you're increasing, and you have X number of views and X number of hours, you can get monetized and you can actually get a paycheck off of it.
oh, those guys that make tens of millions of dollars a month
Yeah.
on YouTube and their content, I mean, it's just so relaxed and really kind of boring to me. When I look at like the biggest creators on YouTube and you look at their early stuff, it's like really impressive. Like they're really trying. Now it's like obviously they got writers, they got a whole production team. You know what I mean? They're just like the face that shows up to say the script that they probably didn't even write anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, but
It's,
it's still an income. They've got their view, they've got their audience, and that's it. They've got their
yeah.
subscribers.
It's also
You
kind of
know,
weird too to be watching like how somebody goes from like just making videos in their room. Like right now, anyone can watching this video can tell I'm probably sitting at ground level, sitting up against a bookshelf, and that's my backdrop. Um, but they go from something like this, and then they're in a studio that's meant to look like something like this.
yeah, right. That it's like what's his name from The Room? Uh,
Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah,
yeah, I love Tommy Wiseau. So like they, if you ever watch the movie based on him with
disaster artist.
Disaster Artist, man, I can't remember anything. Thank you. I love the fact that they recreated the alleys, like the scenes in the movie are literally the places where they were filming, and they recreated it in a studio instead of just shooting it live. So like the alleys, like the rooftops, like those are real places that's the building they're in, but they're recreating it. Like that's what he spent millions of dollars. It's just great.
That is
It's great.
hysterical.
That's what I love too about riff tracks is like, you know, who's another great James, was it James Nguyen, or I don't know how to say his last name, like Nguyen Nguyen. He's another one. He made like some like really crazy like bad sci-fi movies. I mean, low, you want to talk about low budget, it's like
Is
the
it like Ed
camera.
Wood kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's like Ed Wood type stuff. Yeah, I think his name, the director's name, the writer director is James Nguyen or something like that. But man, he's like, or another one, you Ball is basically James is a Ed Wood with a lot of money. And there was a mini documentary I watched him. He's a scam artist. Like he was using some loophole in the German like law system of law allowed him to get money from taxpayers through local government to fund his movies. Because people were like, I would joke, I'm like, how does you like who's throwing money at you, Ball? Like, does he have a dying rich uncle? You know what I mean? Like, who's letting him do these crazy bad movies?
Yeah.
But that's what he was doing. He was making money off like a loophole in the system. So
Yeah.
Just getting grants. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
artist
Throughout the
something like that.
20s
Yeah.
through the 50s, there's a lot of weird scams like that.
Oh, you mean for like movie making?
Oh
Like
yeah.
movie making scams? Yeah.
There's like the
Well,
weird.
people,
I
the
think
actors make good shit.
Nosferatu was. I know that A Trip to the Moon is the most pirated movie of all time.
Is it really?
Nosferatu.
Hmm.
They had a different name for it, but they changed the name,
Yeah.
and then I think they did some kind of copyright thing to
Well,
prevent a
originally
lawsuit.
it was gonna be Dracula.
Yeah,
And
it's gonna be
they couldn't get the
Dracula.
rights. Bram Stoker was still alive and he wouldn't let them do the movie. So that's what if I recall correctly. And so they changed the name of characters so it's like Count Orlo instead of Dracula and shit like that. So but it's the movie you're watching is essentially Dracula.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now, that's a really interesting story too because the original was done in German, I believe,
yep,
and that version is lost. So the one that we
Really?
have is like technically a recreation.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of films that are just lost like that because of the
Yeah.
fire, because the celluloid was so combustible,
yeah.
and there was a
There's
fire
the
in
MGM
Hollywood.
fire. We lost a lot of movies.
Yeah,
There's some,
That's sad to think, man.
yeah, we have a lost Alfred Hitchcock movie called The Mountain Eagle. Um, One of the biggest blockbusters ever, London After Midnight, made in 1928. Like this was considered Lon Chaney's masterpiece,
Mm.
and and that movie's lost. That the last known copy burned up in '67, and the MGM fire. One of the
It's almost like
earlier.
the Library of Alexander burning
Yeah,
down. You know
right.
what I mean? It's not as bad, obviously, but it has the same sort of funeral feeling to it. You know, like you mourn the loss of that art, that
Yeah,
history. You know,
it sucks. It sucks. There's a
that's
couple
what's
other
really
movies I
interesting.
would have loved to have watched. There was one of the first versions of Frankenstein, like in the
Oh,
30s, and there was an early Cleopatra. Because it wasn't until the 30s when people started getting censorship because of
mm.
two movies, Tarzan's Mate, and you definitely see at points that girl is not wearing underwear. Um,
I'll have to go back and watch it for
For
scientific
scientific,
study.
yes.
for scientific study. And then there's one movie. Um, it's I didn't even watch the full thing. It's so gross. It's called The Quest for Beauty. There's just like
Mm.
full. It's just like the way it was filmed. It was just so gross. Like just the full nude scenes, with just like dozens of people like walking around just butt naked.
Huh.
Just a bunch of fed middle-aged Americans just telling.
Yeah, just like a bunch of Hollywood people being like, "All right, I'll do anything for a paycheck."
It's like a two real eyes wide shut. It's like, ooh, it's not models. I thought it'd be models.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's worse than I would say. It's like more over the edge and disturbing than Eyes Wide Shut.
You know, the disturbing part of that movie, for me at least, is not the sexuality or even the sexism. It's the society, like how dark. Because I really do feel like the world is run by villains, and I'm sure that's like their low level playing field. You know what I mean? Like that's just the
Oh, that's
beginning of
yeah,
their
that's what a lot of
debauchery.
people are like. I mean, look at what Weinstein did, and then if you read
Yeah,
Corey Feldman's book, he gives everybody his name. He tells who's doing what, who did what, who got away with it, how they got away with it. Um, Child actors, there's a way where up to 99% of whatever they're making, or 95% of, I think it's 95% of whatever they're making can get taken from them. Their
that's why I
managers,
turned away from The Voice.
yeah, their managers can take like 85% of their money, and then their
Jeez.
parents can take an additional 10%. So Corey Feldman, like he was doing movies like Gremlins, and he was only walking away with like $40,000 out of a million,
Hmm. Hmm.
or out of
Wow.
millions. Like I feel really bad for child actors because there's so many loopholes for them to just get significantly screwed.
Yeah.
And then their parent or whoever is their guardianship or their management can set up these trusts where they can control their money and control their career. It's
Yeah, look at Macaulay
terrible.
Culkin. That happened to him. That's why
You
he
think
was.
the children had the most protection?
They should.
They
You
should.
know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It is like just disgusting as to how kids are not legally protected.
No, it's not a healthy environment. Oh, well, we could have a conversation about that. I feel like it's getting worse in this day and age. Like all the
Yeah.
shit I see and hear and read, it's like,
Oh,
I
there's a
don't know
book.
about worse. I think it's just
Actually, do
more
I have
prevalent.
it?
Like, yeah,
There's
not prevalent. It's more easy
this
to
one
see.
guy, Chris Thurber, in the unexpected pressures of parenting. Oh, the unlikely art of parental pressure. Sorry, I got that name significantly wrong. I'm sorry, Chris. And so this is like Exeter Academy. This is a prestigious school that like people shell out a lot of money to send their kids to. Dan Brown taught there at one point. And he's talking about like just the horrific abuse that kids endure because of like social media and smartphones now.
mm-hmm.
There's one case he went over where one of the students who was seeing him, parents could track her movement, so they knew she was in like the sick hall. I don't know what, I can't remember off the top of my head what was the area that kids went to for shrinks or doctors, and uh, because she was there, they knew, and she told him like, "Oh, I have to lie to them and say that I have a cold. I'm not seeing a therapist." And when a test is graded, her parents are able to see it before her. They're the first to know. They have notification systems. They can look at her grades. And then, depending on how she does, there's social media groups for the parents to post this. And this poor kid is like stressed out of her mind, not to actually like do well, but she's just so afraid of like feeling her parents' wrath if she doesn't do well in school. She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't keep her grades up. That's what she's more worried about. And then, because there are kids that get notified by their parents through these social media groups when the grades are first posted, then they will take it out on each other. I mean, it's just like, what happens to kids these days is horrible. They're not allowed to be children anymore.
There's no proper, I feel like, yeah, there's no proper consequence. And consequence, when you do wrong, that's how you train to do right, right? That's how you learn empathy. That's how you learn to be a good person and recognize that there are things that you yourself will not like as an outcome based on your actions, right? So, like when I was a little kid and I lied about grades in school or I hid, report cards and things like that, I found out later how that hurt me, and that's what made me stop doing it. Was not the wrath of my parents. I could handle that. They could be, my mother could swing at me all she wanted. It was like whatever, right? You get numb to that. After a certain point. And I'm not saying I wasn't abused or anything. That was just, raising
Right.
children was
Yeah.
different than I think was better, but whatever.
Smacking
But
your kids.
well, I just think that yeah, I think in certain situations that like physical discipline, it is useful. I do think that
Oh
when
yeah, it
you,
can
you
be.
like physical pain is something you should learn, not just emotional pain. Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
always imagining pain, and that's like the society we're like going into, is like a lot of people who imagine pain. They imagine oppression. They imagine all these things that could happen to them that aren't necessarily possibly happening to them like all the time, right? And like that's the image that you just drew with that story that you told. I think that's sick. I think not allowing people to fail makes them live a life of nothing but failure, because you just what are you training them for?
I can't believe that the tracking app on her phone is that accurate to the what room she is in a building.
Yeah, how come I didn't have
Like
that in
that,
GP in
like
surveying?
that's crazy. And then
That's funny.
yeah, just
Uh,
having the notifications of the grades. I don't know. I think you need to be able to trust your kids. I think that's part of it, and learn teaching them how
Oh,
to trust and to value that people trust them as well,
that
and
if
not just assume
well,
they're doing
yeah.
something wrong.
Well, it's like not
absolutely
even that. It's like the kids aren't at that point. The kids aren't even learning.
right.
They're
What are
not.
they
They're not
learning? What are
learning.
they?
They're
Yeah.
not gaining anything that's actually going to benefit them. I mean, like if I were a teacher, honestly, like if for some reason like there was a college that was like, all right, Garrett, I think you could teach. We'll give you a shot at it. Honestly, I'd be willing to like muck with grades if kids could prove, like if whoever the students were could prove to me that they're learning and they're really working at it and
Oh,
they're
teachers don't
developing
do that all the time.
effort. Then
Yeah.
yeah, I'd be willing. Like I don't care. I'd be willing to get yelled at just because somebody can learn. It
Well,
proves
there's
it.
also opportunities for extra credit too that you can create.
Yeah,
So, like, I had a physics teacher that would he's like, I understand this is a very complicated subject. So, like, I'm going to make some very easy extra credit, and you can do this once a week, and you'll be fine. And even and you could have the potential to have an over 100% because of the extra credit.
yeah,
That's the out of a good teacher, I think,
Yeah.
because
yeah,
they if they like if you disagree with the curriculum and you want children still to learn and pass, because extra credit can be whatever the hell you want it to be,
Yeah.
or at least that's how it used to be. So yeah, I had an earth science teacher. That's what he would do, because he and a history teacher. I had a really good history teacher. We used to spend the first like part of the class because that was the window he thought he'd be checked on, because he was checked on by the staff, right, his managers or the principal, because he wasn't always following what their curriculum was, because it was wrong, and he was a history major, like he had a doctorate in history, so he knew it was wrong, right? So we'd spend the first 10-15 minutes going over the book, and he basically, in a way, his way would tell us what the answers were to like the test, and then he'd give us the real lesson, and then we'd close our books and just leave them on the desk. And then he'd give us he's like, here's why the Civil War really started, like shit like that. Like, here's what Columbus really did, like it was awesome. Like I feel lucky that I had him as a history teacher. This is like
awesome.
grade school. It's like 5th or 6th grade. I was like 6th grade.
Yeah. I had a high school math teacher. She was like a by the book teacher, but my senior year of math, she was like, all right, if you continue to be in this one class, you're going to fail. So we're going to switch you over to an independent study. And basically all I did was like go through math books and figure out what should be proposed for classes or what should be proposed to teach to kids or not. And that was like how I passed. And I also learned a lot more from it. Yeah. Like I was like reading through like textbooks that are like, this is everyday mathematics that's going to help you with your taxes.
I there's still a part of me that wants to be a teacher, but there's the immediate response from the upper echelon of management in my brain is like, they'd fire you.
Nowadays, yeah, they'd probably fire you.
Yeah, they just fire you. You think that's not a good idea. That's not good.
Yeah. Like I think the kids would be more than interested in learning, but at the same time, it's like, oh man, the administration.
See, that's just it. Like even as a kid, I remember when I paid attention in class is when I didn't know what the teacher was going to say. It's like a bad Hollywood movie. When I got in the class and I knew what the plot was, like they're running through the motions. Like, why would I pay attention? Like I already felt too smart for that. Like, I had that mentality. It's like, you're just wasting my time, but you're getting paid for it and I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah.
So I was lucky though. I think everybody hopefully has like at least one or two good teachers through their public schooling life or whatever schooling life, that they can say made a change.
Yeah. Well, I think most teachers care too.
Because
they don't get paid enough to do that job and not care. Like you got to have some kind of passion for it. Otherwise, you're definitely not doing it for the money. There's not much money in teaching.
There's one guy. No, keep going.
I was just gonna say in like rural areas and low income places, like you're definitely not getting paid. So those are where you find the teachers that really care the most.
Yeah. I mean, I know one guy who's a inner city middle school teacher, and he's like, oh, I don't really like care. I pass just about all of my kids. Just I want to try and like make sure that they have, like a good time when they come into my class. Like it's a good place for them.
That's kind of cool too, in the sense like there was a teacher I had that was like that. It was kind of like a safe space, not in the modern definition of that term, but and not in the modern context, but in the sense that because you never know which child is suffering from abuse in their home or what their life is like. So to have a classroom and a group of people where things were just cool, things were chill, things were comfortable, it's like a break in your day, right, from your stress, your anxiety, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't remember learning anything in that class, but we just had kind of podcast like conversations, you know what I mean? And that was it. Like it's like our work was very low. Like I don't even remember doing anything significant. It was like social studies type class. Nice. I don't even remember the name of the class. But I remember like the experience like that. It was just like, it's like hanging out with your friends and smoking, but we weren't smoking.
So my favorite class in high school was it was called CAT, and it was Contemporary American Thought, and we would just talk about different current events and stuff like that, and our ideas on different things, and just kind of have a discussion about whatever topic we decided to research that day. So that was a really cool class because it taught you how to think, how to communicate your ideas, how to accept other people's ideas, how to have a productive conversation, which I think is just extremely useful. And that's what I do here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is Cat.
Yeah, this is Cat all over again.
Yeah.
That the name, though, I was just going to say maybe we should have named it Cat, but then it sounds kind of like masterpiece theater. Like it's very, contemporary American thought with your host, Zach Wiegand. Like it's very, austere kind of sounding.
But it sounds very proper, right?
Yeah.
Very posh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be funny.
All right. So,
Look.
is it final question time, Zach?
Sure. We can have our final question.
Do you have a final question?
What is your favorite book on that shelf behind you? And why?
That's a good question. Let's see. I'd pick two books. I'm going to pick my copy of The Tane, and then probably...
Can you face the mic and say that one again? I missed what it was called.
No worries. I'll pick two.
All right.
If I can pick them up. I swear, guys, I'm not drunk. So my copy of The Tane, the translation. This is the earliest writings of ancient Celtic myths and literature.
Cool.
And then the book of English Magic by Philip Nolan Marr.
Now, is that about magic? Like magic?
Yeah.
Tricks?
So it talks about the history of England and its magical beliefs. And it goes into like details on each chapter, which is really fun because you go all the way from like prehistoric times to more contemporary. And yet an interesting history too as to why it resurged.
Really? So what kind of... So okay, so the original magic they were practicing in the book that the book goes over, what kind of religion was that tied to? Or if it wasn't?
Yeah. We actually don't... I don't think we actually know the names of these religions. I think it's just because the cultures either didn't write it down or they didn't really think about naming their religion anything.
Yeah.
So the earliest...
So it's just like Old English mythology is what you would call it, pretty much?
Yeah, that'd be the best way to call it. Because some of these things go all the way back. It's not in this book. This more recently, I started finding some of this on like Lost Oddities with Albert Lynn. But some of it goes all the way back to like hunter-gatherer days during caveman era.
Dude, could you imagine being a magician in that time? Like, that must have been... You must have been
the closest thing to a god, right?
Dude, you got all the cave women, right? I mean, like if you can do a card trick with flat rocks or something like that, oh my god.
Yeah.
So is that more to do with like divination and like trying to read like casting runes and things like that?
That's one part of it. It's one part of it. There's multiple languages that have used runes. So the Celts used Ogham. The Norse had Nordic runes. Those are the most popular runes.
Right.
Which if you want somebody who's a really good source, very dry, but very informative, Scott T. Shell, you can look him up. Germanic Continental Heathenry, I think is the YouTube channel, is what it's called.
Okay.
And he talks about from Germanic to Anglo-Saxon to Norse runes. And he even goes, so he talks about the rituals, he talks about the history, he talks about the evolution of runes, and then for people who are interested in practicing or believe in this stuff, how to create your own runes. And yeah, so that's a very extensive history. It talks about, because Ralph Bloom, he wrote the first, I think it was the very first on writing runes. And there's a lot of information he did that was very inaccurate for the time.
So he's just making shit up like Tolkien style?
I don't know if he was making it up. I think it was just like the archaeology of the time. Because in the 1800s, when this kind of material first came up, when people started having a serious interest in it, people were just going off of what they could find. We didn't have the archaeology like we do nowadays.
Sure. Yeah.
Or archaeologists went somewhere, they didn't have the resources or availability to go ahead and do the kind of work that we can do now. So they would just kind of throw something at the wall. Controversially, in Egypt, the whole belief that King Khufu made made pyramids, that was just something that some guy kind of ripped. He's like, I have no idea, but I see King Khufu's name come up a lot, so he just went with that.
That's crazy.
He didn't really have
Yeah,
any
it's
evidence, but he's just like, all right, we'll just go with that. That was a
yeah,
prime
the
case.
leading theory.
Yeah, I think Ralph tried his best, but there's a lot that's very inaccurate in this book. And in the Book of English Magic that's talked about, Scott Shell talks about it. So, yeah, that is one of the things that's talked about. That is divination. If people read the sagas, the saga of Egil particularly talks about runes and rune making a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of divination. But there's other things in this as well. So there's the talk of protective magics, like taking an iron circle and then wrapping hemlock around it, and that will protect. And if you bury it, it'll protect your property from thieves.
That's pretty cool.
There's the belief of warding off evil by placing iron nails in all four corners of your house. Because ancient people believed that iron warded off evil. Evil didn't like that. Or spirits didn't like that.
Right.
That's why there's some people that write very clear instructions. Do not use iron to carve runes. There's a few other things that very little bit talks about geomancy, which is the belief you could manipulate the ground for teleportation, the earth for teleportation, which is in a lot of Celtic myths. And funny enough, some of the Celtic myths do parallel to our leading theories on wormholes.
Really, like with fairies and different, like the Fey realm and stuff like that.
Not necessarily the Fey realm, because fairies was like a general term for things that are unseen.
Right.
And the they believed in things like fairy circles. There are certain spots on the ground that things unseen from other worlds can come through. They believed certain times of the year, around what we'd call the autumn equinox and the spring equinox, those are the times of the year where somebody could potentially open up a wormhole, according to their beliefs.
Oh man, that'd be weird if wormholes were like weather.
Yeah.
You have to worry about it like a tornado or something.
Yeah. The Celts believed in a lot. There's some very interesting stuff they believed in certain times of year, but they also had, like, their whole religious beliefs were based around nature and seasons. If you look at the European pagan calendar, they had 8 seasons. There were 2 harvests in the year. One started in July and went till some point in August, and they had a second harvest, and that was September starting and getting into the start of October. And then this time of year, October, November, start of December was a lot of people call it Samhain. It's spelled Samhain. My great grandmother called it Samain. And yeah, so this was like the pagan New Year.
Okay.
And then there's
like what Halloween turned into for our modern culture.
Yeah. Or Winter Nights, as the Vikings called it, the Norse called it. Um, it was all based around the seasons, and they believed that certain times of the year, that's when worlds crossed over. So they believed at this time of the year was when the veil between our world and the veil between the world of spirits or the fairy world, with a much more generalized term for it, crossed over. And so this is where you can see your ancestors. This is where you could go to other worlds potentially. And it remained open until the springtime. And that was when the veil began to thicken again.
That's a long window.
Yeah, but I mean, they were really superstitious people. They feared this, the cold half of the year for religious purposes. I mean, they believed, and I mean, it also, it makes sense. I mean, if you never seen a screeching owl or a fish cat before, and you hear it screaming in the middle of the night, I mean, no wonder you'd think that's a banshee or something terrifying. So yeah, they believed in things like that. And another thing too is what they feared too with the snow being on the ground is if you were to fall asleep or step the wrong way, you would step on a fairy circle. I mean, they knew how to identify what they believed were fairy circles and spots that could take you into other worlds. And so that would make sense. You can't really see the ground. It's covered in snow. You don't know where you're stepping. You don't know what you're stepping on. You don't know if the snow is thin or thick. You don't know if the ice is thin or thick.
Yeah, like it's like an accidental safety precaution.
Yep.
For walking in the wild. And I remember when I was a surveyor, like I had to actually think about stuff like that because I've fallen into like snowbanks and other shit. And I didn't know what was below. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, exactly. It's like, oh, yeah, there goes Mark. Bye, buddy.
It's like, see like a rod. It looks like, it's like, Planet Hoth or whatever from Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like a little droid top going by. It's like, oh, he's still alive. Okay, that's
it's
good.
still alive. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of that stuff's very fascinating to me.
I think it's cool. Yeah. And like what our modern fantasy lore in video games is like pretty much based on it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of exposed to it all the time. Especially if you're like us, if you're a gamer or whatever.
Yeah.
Or even if you're into like, Marvel movies and DC movies, a lot of that that's where they borrow all their shit from pretty much. Even the superpowers that a lot of the characters have are, from ancient mythos and gods.
Right? Like what is the Hulk but colon?
Yeah, I mean it's a little more niceified than the actual.
Yeah, no, it definitely it's made PG for sure. I mean, especially with like some mythologies, definitely. I mean, it's like Mother Goose, right? The Mother Goose books that I grew up on are not the real Mother Goose stories. If you go, read like Grimm Tales and stuff like that, you're gonna see like this shit is not. This is like rated R, man. Like this shit's vile,
I know, and that's what they used to read to kids.
Yeah,
like don't go to the woods; you'll get chopped up into pieces by a wolf.
Yeah, or get kidnapped and eaten alive or baked alive. It's like, yeah, that would probably stop me from going out in the woods if I believed that.
Yeah. But things like that used to happen. It's crazy. There's a bunch of crazy shit that used to go on.
Look, even in our modern society, I've seen like policemen talk about this on certain documentaries. Like, basically, I don't remember the numbers exactly anymore, but basically, it's really low the number of violent cases that get solved, right? And those are just the ones that get reported. So really, most people are getting away with shit in our society. We don't think about that on a day-to-day basis, but that's what's really going on. Most crime people get away with.
Yeah.
So imagine a time when there were no phones, there were no lights, there were no cameras, there was no constant presence of law. Like it was you and your pitchfork, man. Like whatever you had.
Yeah.
So yeah, you had to think up shit to scare people away from you. Especially in it, the advantage too is like if you lived in a time where thieves and criminals did believe what you believed, right? So if a criminal did believe that iron and hemlock would, do something terrible to him, maybe he wouldn't invade your home. You know what I mean? Like a modern criminal wouldn't think that way. But like maybe it did work to the advantage for time. There must have been a time at least when everybody was on the same page.
They say with like curses, the way that it works, like especially like in voodoo, it's not that voodoo's necessarily real. It's that they believe it to be real, so it takes effect. It's the same
Right.
thing as like a placebo effect kind of
Yeah,
thing.
Yeah.
exactly. But I mean, another thing too, like if you use voodoo as an example, the poison that's made, um,
Yeah.
that people believe makes zombies. I mean, can you imagine like a time where people knew herbs and roots so well they could make something like that?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good thought. Like we have this, at least I know I've had this perception or this presumption that modern medicine figured it all out, but there have been herbalists and alchemists for, since there've been man pretty much. So there were people that knew the medicinal effects of certain combinations of things found in nature, and really it's they're the experts we learned we stole. We're the Edisons, we're modern Edisons of that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, that I even think like it's too bad that I feel like not only does holistic healing or holistic knowledge get a bad rap, but there is a lot of it that is just total woo woo,
Oh yeah,
that is just
definitely.
really not real. But there are definitely some good things in like holistic healing. And I really, the healing takes place in your body anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you cure you. There's nothing really that you take that cures you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
So,
that's what a lot of people say about addicts as well. It's like you don't get better until you
yeah.
decide you want to get better. You don't get over this
Right.
until you decide.
Yeah.
And
No,
yeah,
yeah, I think your mentality is part of the healing process,
yeah, and that's
for a
what
lot of
yeah,
things.
and that's what fast drew me initially to magic is like how can you get someone? Cheryl Costa writes this has this book called The Writings of a Rogue Witch, and she just point blank gets right to it and says it's like, look, you really want to like resolve these problems you have to do these rituals that make you every day get out and address the problem, and you don't
Hmm.
get better until you do it. And that's what to me is really cool about wanting to do, like, right now I'm trying to do a documentary on witchcraft. I started it, and you talk to any of the old timers, um, Lori Bruno, Lori Cabot, they're I mean, they're pretty rigid, but they got a point to it. They're the ones that are like, no, you have to get out and you have to do this. You have to address the problem. And they call people out on their BS all the time.
No, well, if you think about, no, I agree. And if you think about it, we just rename shit, right? We
Yeah.
rename spells with psychology, you know what I mean, or ritual, or what, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like a lot of what we
Yeah.
believe is
Routine.
just renamed. It's still just a magic trick to us. You know what I mean? In terms of like practice,
Yeah.
what we believe it can do, bad or good.
Or it's
But
taken. Yeah. Or it's taken and like restructured in a way
yeah.
to sell something to someone.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of modern snake oil. I feel that is just so well marketed to us. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like food, everything is
Oh,
just
yeah.
made to look like a like some galactic committee got together to make sure Ritz crackers are safe for your children. So put them in everything. You know what I mean? Like there's just
Yeah.
sort of that. Like you just
Some
are made to
galactic.
trust. Yeah, like how
Yeah.
could you doubt the fact that this food is, ignore that it's banned in other countries. It's safe and good for you too. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't mean to have like that 50s announcer voice, but that's just kind of how it is in my head. It's like Ren and Stimpy. That's
Yeah.
why I love Ren and Stimpy. They
Stimpy, you
mock that so
idiot.
well, like powdered toast man. So, all right. So, should we do a final thought
Sure.
before we close the episode? All
Yeah.
right. Um, tomorrow morning, if let's say tomorrow morning you wake up to a microphone to the world, the podium to the world, and everybody's silent and waiting to hear what you have to say, what would you say to the world?
Oh man, sounds like something I'd ask at the end of Bard's Archive. um, get out there, explore life, explore the world in your own way, and it's not a matter of always reaching a means to an end or proving something or being the person that discovers something. Uh, Sometimes it's just a matter of getting out there and enjoying yourself in the moment, doing what it is that you're doing. Either if it's history or religion or sports or whatever it is that you do, as long as you are enjoying and content with what it is that you're doing is what matters, as well as don't throw your history away. Don't ignore other people's stories. Listen to each other. Love each other. Peace, not war.